It belongs in the trash. My mother Beatrice did not just throw away a rusted metal box. She threw away $45 million. She looked at my grandfather's legacy and saw garbage. But when I took that same box to the bank the next morning, the manager did not see trash. He turned pale, locked the doors, and called the police. Not to arrest me, but to protect me from her. Before we get to the moment my mother realized she was homeless in her own house, please hit that like button and subscribe. If you have ever been treated like the family mistake this story is for you, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. My name is Aliyah, and at 32 years old I was the family secret. The funeral was over, but the performance was just beginning. My mother's estate in the hills was packed with the city's elite. Doctors, lawyers, and politicians were crowding her living room. People who would not have looked at my grandfather Otis twice when he was alive were now drinking expensive scotch in his honor. The air inside the house was suffocating, thick with expensive perfume and fake sympathy. I could not breathe in there. I slipped out through the kitchen and made my way to the detached garage. This was where Grandpa Otis had spent his last years. Not in the guest bedroom, but here in a converted studio above the garage, because Beatrice said his old clothes smelled like mothballs and embarrassed her guests. I sat on his worn-out recliner holding the only thing the lawyer handed me after the service, a rusted biscuit tin. It was heavy, cold, and ugly. It did not look like much, but it felt like him. I was tracing the dents on the lid when the side door banged open. The noise made me jump. Beatrice stood there, framed by the afternoon sun. She looked impeccable in her black silk dress, her pearls glowing against her skin. But her face was twisted in a snarl she only saved for me. "For God's sake, Aliyah," she hissed, marching toward me. "The councilman is asking where you are, and you are hiding in this dump." She did not give me a chance to speak. She reached down and snatched the tin box from my lap. "Give me that. Mom, please," I stammered, reaching for it. "It is Grandpa's." Beatrice laughed, a harsh, cruel sound. "It is trash, Aliyah, just like the rest of his hoard." She walked to the large metal waste bin in the corner. "He is gone. I am finally cleaning up this mess." With a flick of her wrist, she tossed the box. It hit the side of the bin with a loud, hollow clang, before falling into the darkness among the garbage bags. "Leave it," she commanded, pointing a manicured finger at my face. "That box stays buried. If I see you bring that filth into my house, you can sleep in the street." Before I could even process her threat, the garage door swung open again. This time it was not just my mother. My younger sister Dominique walked in, phone held high, the ring light reflecting in her perfectly applied highlighter. She was live streaming, of course. Behind her trailed Brad, her husband of 6 months, looking out of place in his designer suit that cost more than my car. He was wiping his forehead with a silk handkerchief, visibly annoyed by the dust in the garage. "Look, guys, here is the behind-the-scenes reality," Dominique cooed into her phone, panning the camera around the cluttered space before landing on me. "This is my sister Aliyah. She is currently dumpster diving." "Say hi, Aliyah." She giggled, expecting her followers to find my humiliation entertaining. I turned away, shielding the tin box with my body, but Brad had already spotted it. He stepped forward, his polished loafers crunching on the concrete floor. "What do we have here?" "A time capsule from the Depression era," Brad asked, his voice dripping with that specific brand of condescension only investment bankers seem to master. He reached over and tapped the lid of the tin with a manicured fingernail. My mother let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, do not touch it, Brad. You might catch tetanus. Aliyah thinks she found a treasure map." Brad pried the lid open before I could stop him. Inside, resting on top of yellowed newspaper clippings, was the Passbook. It was blue, the cover faded almost to gray with the words Liberty Community Savings stamped in gold foil that had long since flaked away. Brad picked it up, holding it by the corner as if it were contaminated. "Liberty Community Savings." He scoffed, looking at my mother. "Beatrice, did your father actually bank here? This place went under in the 80s. It was one of those small neighborhood banks that handed out lollipops because they could not afford interest payments. He tossed the book back into the tin with a careless flick of his wrist. It landed with a thud that felt like a physical blow to my chest. "Aaliyah, honey," he said, turning his gaze to me, a smirk playing on his lips. "I know you work in a library, so you have a thing for old paper, but this is embarrassing. That bank does not exist anymore. That book is worth less than the paper it is printed on. It is a souvenir of failure. Just like this garage." Dominique moved closer, zooming in on the rusted box. "A souvenir of failure," she repeated for her audience. Oh my God. Brad is so savage but so true. Grandpa Otis was sweet, but let us be real, he was not exactly a financial genius. That is why we have Brad to handle the estate now. Right, baby? She leaned into him and he wrapped an arm around her waist, preening for the camera. "You should listen to Brad, Aaliyah," my mother added, crossing her arms. "He manages portfolios for actual millionaires. If he says it is trash, it is trash. Now put it back in the bin and come inside. The caterers are serving the lobster thermidor, and I do not want the guests asking why my daughter smells like rust and poverty." I looked at the three of them. My mother desperate to erase her past. My sister desperate for validation from strangers. And Brad, desperate to prove he was superior to the family he married into. They saw a rusted box and a dead bank. They saw failure. But as I looked down at the passbook, I noticed something they had all missed. A faint embossed code on the bottom right corner of the cover. OP-1965-G. It was not a standard account number. It looked like a classification code I had seen in archival documents for founding charters. I stood up, clutching the tin to my chest. "No," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I am not coming inside, and I am keeping the box." Brad laughed, a loud barking sound that echoed off the metal walls. "Suit yourself, Aaliyah. Just do not come crying to me when you realize you are hoarding literal garbage. I hope that rusty metal keeps you warm at night." He was not a failure. My voice shook, but I forced the words out, cutting through the thick layer of their amusement. Grandpa Otis worked for the Postal Service for 40 years. He walked 10 miles a day in rain and snow so you could go to private school, Mom. He had dignity. He did not need a designer label to know who he was. Beatrice stopped laughing. Her face went rigid, the mask of the grieving daughter slipping completely to reveal the resentment she had nursed for decades. She took a step toward me, her heels clicking aggressively on the concrete. "Do not talk to me about dignity, Aaliyah. You confuse dignity with stubbornness. Your grandfather was an anchor around my neck." She gestured around the garage, her eyes full of disdain. "You think I am cruel? Let me tell you about the garden party 3 years ago. The one where I finally got the invitation for the governor's wife to attend. I begged Otis to stay in his room. I begged him, but no, he had to come out. He wanted to help." She paused, her lips curling in disgust. "He saw a guest struggling with a flat tire in the driveway. Instead of calling the valet, he got down on his knees in his Sunday suit. He was changing a tire in front of the city's elite, getting grease all over his hands. When the governor's wife asked who the helpful maintenance man was, do you know what I said? I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I stared at her, dreading the answer. I told her he was the new groundskeeper." Beatrice whispered the words like a venomous secret. "I denied my own father because admitting he was my blood was social suicide. He was content being small, Aaliyah. He was comfortable in the dirt. I am not. I have spent 30 years scrubbing the scent of his poverty off this family name. I clawed my way into the country club. I married a man who could give us this house. I will not let you drag his mediocrity back into my living room." She pointed a sharp, manicured finger at the door connecting the garage to the main house. "That box is a symbol of everything I escaped. It is old, it is dirty, and it represents a life of counting pennies. You have a choice. You can drop that piece of junk in the bin right now and come inside to eat with civilized people, or you can take it and leave. But hear me clearly. If you walk out that door with that trash in your hands, do not come back. Do not bring that filth past my threshold." I looked at Dominique and Brad. They were not laughing anymore, but they were not defending me either. Dominique looked bored, scrolling through her phone while Brad checked his watch, clearly ready to get back to the open bar. They were her creations, perfect statues of the world she built. Grandpa was real. This box was real. I looked down at the rusted tin again. If my mother was willing to disown her father to impress a governor's wife, what would she do to me? The answer was standing right in front of me. I did not need to think twice. I gripped the cold metal tighter, feeling the weight of the passbook inside shifting against the sides. It was heavy with secrets she was too arrogant to uncover. "I am not throwing him away," I said quietly. Beatrice sneered, turning her back on me. "Then get out. You are just like him. Small. And you always will be." She slammed the door shut, leaving me alone in the dust of the garage, holding a fortune she thought was garbage. The silence in the garage was deafening after the door slammed. I stood there staring at the metal waste bin. My mother had drawn a line in the sand. On one side was her approval, her money, and a seat at a table where I was not wanted. On the other side was a rusted tin box sitting in a pile of garbage. I did not have to think for long. I walked over to the bin and reached inside. The smell of stale coffee grounds and discarded flowers hit me instantly. It was humiliating. I had a master's degree in archival science, yet here I was, digging through trash like a scavenger, just to save the one piece of my grandfather that remained. My fingers brushed against the cold metal. I pulled the tin out, wiping a smear of grease off the lid with my sleeve. I held it tight against my chest, feeling its solid weight grounding me. I grabbed my purse and hit the button for the side garage door. As it rolled up, revealing the long paved driveway lined with luxury cars, I saw Beatrice standing there. She was instructing a valet parker, but she stopped the moment she saw me. Her eyes dropped immediately to the tin box in my arms. "I warned you, Aaliyah," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper so the guests on the patio would not hear. "I told you not to bring that trash out here." "I am leaving, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I am taking it with me. I will not bother your guests." Beatrice took a step closer, blocking my path to my beat-up Honda Civic. "You think this is a game? You think you can defy me and still live on my dime?" She crossed her arms, her diamond bracelets catching the sunlight. "If you put that box in your car, do not expect the rent check for your apartment next week. In fact, do not expect anything ever again. That apartment is in my name. I will have the locks changed by Monday." My heart hammered against my ribs. She knew exactly where to hit. I was barely scraping by on my library salary. Without her help, I would be homeless in a month. She was leveraging my survival against my grandfather's memory. It was the ultimate power move. She expected me to crumble. She expected me to drop the box, apologize, and beg for forgiveness. I looked at her. Really looked at her for the first time in years. I saw the fear behind her anger. She was terrified of anything she could not control. I gripped the tin tighter. "Keep the money," I said. My voice was quiet, but it did not waver. "I would rather sleep in my car with this box than sleep in a mansion with a woman who throws her own father in the trash." Beatrice's jaw dropped. For a second, she looked genuinely shocked. I did not wait for her to recover. I walked past her, opened my car door, and placed the tin gently on the passenger seat. As I drove away, I saw her standing in the driveway, a small angry figure shrinking in my rearview mirror. I was broke. I was effectively homeless. I was crying so hard I could barely see the road. But for the first time in my life, I was free. I drove until the manicured lawns of the hills turned into cracked pavement, and the air smelled less like jasmine and more like exhaust. My apartment was a fourth-floor walk-up in a part of the city my mother refused to visit without locking her car doors twice. It was small and the radiator rattled when the heat kicked on, but it was mine. Or at least it was mine until the first of the month. My mother's threat was still ringing in my ears. She controlled the lease. She controlled the deposit. By next week I could be packing my life into cardboard boxes. I climbed the stairs, my legs feeling heavy. Inside, I placed the rusted tin box on my scratched coffee table. In the harsh light of my kitchen bulb, it looked even more pathetic than it had in the garage. Was Brad right? Was I just holding on to garbage because I was too sentimental to let go? I sat on my sagging couch and ran my fingers over the dented lid. The metal was cold, but it brought back a memory so vivid, I could almost smell the peppermint and Old Spice Grandpa Otis always wore. It was 2 months before he died. We were in the garage, and he was organizing his old tools. He had called me over and pressed a different book into my hands, a leather-bound journal. He looked me dead in the eye, his face serious in a way that scared me. "Aaliyah," he had said, his voice raspy. "People will judge a book by its cover. They will judge a man by his shoes. They will judge a house by its paint. But you listen to me." He tapped his temple with a calloused finger. "The real value is never on the surface. The real value is in the numbers inside. It is in the history nobody bothers to read. Do not let them fool you with shiny things, baby girl. Shiny things rust just as fast as iron, but they hide the rot better." I had not understood him then. I thought he was talking about my mother and her obsession with appearances. But looking at the tin box now, I realized he was giving me a map. He knew they would throw this away. He knew they would see a dead bank and a rusted container and assume it was worthless. He was counting on their arrogance. I opened the tin again. The passbook lay there, blue and faded. Liberty Community Savings. I pulled out my phone and searched the name. Brad was right about one thing. The bank had been acquired decades ago. It was now part of First National, the biggest financial institution in the state. But that code OP 1965G was still a mystery. Google had no answers for me. My phone buzzed. A text from Dominique. "Mom is serious, Aaliyah." She called the landlord. "You better apologize." I deleted the message. I was done apologizing for existing. I was done being the family disappointment. I looked at the passbook one last time. Grandpa Otis never lied to me. He never made me feel small. If he kept this, there was a reason. I set my alarm for 7 in the morning. I was going to walk into the headquarters of First National with this piece of trash. I was going to find out what my grandfather was hiding. And if they laughed at me like Brad did, well, at least I would know I honored the only man who ever loved me for me. I turned off the light, leaving the city glow to illuminate the rusted box. Tomorrow, everything was going to change. First National was a monolith in the center of the financial district. I parked my Honda 2 blocks away to avoid the valet fees and walked the rest of the distance. My hands were shaking. I clutched the rusted tin box inside my tote bag like it was a bomb. In a way it was. It was either going to blow up my life or build a new one. The lobby was freezing. It smelled of expensive cologne and money. Men in 3-piece suits rushed past me, barking into Bluetooth headsets. Women in pencil skirts clicked their heels on the polished marble floors. I pulled my cardigan tighter around myself. It was my best sweater, but here it looked threadbare. I could feel the security guards tracking me. A young black woman in comfortable shoes and no designer bag. I did not belong. I approached the teller window. The guy behind the glass was young, maybe fresh out of college. His name tag read Kevin. He was typing furiously on his keyboard and did not even look up when I stopped at his station. I cleared my throat. "Excuse me," I said. Kevin stopped typing. He looked at my hands resting on the counter, then up to my face. His eyes did a quick scan, assessing my worth in less than a second. He landed on a 0. "Can I help you?" he asked. His tone made it clear he hoped the answer was no. I reached into my bag and pulled out the blue passbook. I did not bring the tin, just the book. I slid it under the glass partition. "I need to check the balance on this account," I said. Kevin looked at the faded blue cover. He did not pick it up. He actually recoiled slightly as if it smelled. "Ma'am, this is the main branch for high net worth individuals," he said, his voice dripping with fake politeness. "We do not handle personal checking accounts here. The retail branch is on 4th Street. "It is not a checking account," I said, keeping my voice steady. despite my heart hammering against my ribs. It is a savings account. From Liberty Community Savings. Kevin let out a short, sharp breath that was almost a laugh. Liberty Community. He looked around the lobby as if checking to see if this was a prank. Ma'am, that bank has been gone for 40 years. Whatever is in that book is void. Look, I do not want to be rude, but you are holding up the line. He reached under the counter. I saw his finger hover over a silent button. I knew that look. It was the same look my mother gave the homeless men downtown. He thought I was a beggar. He thought I was crazy. Please just run the number, I insisted, pushing the book closer. I am going to ask you to leave, Kevin said, his voice dropping the customer service facade. If you do not walk away right now, I am calling security to escort you out. We have paying clients here. We do not have time for fairy tales. I froze. The shame was hot and instant. I grabbed the passbook ready to run. But then I saw it. The reflection of my grandfather in the glass partition. He would not run. He would not let a 20-year-old in a cheap tie dismiss him. I slammed my hand down on the marble counter. It made a loud smack that silenced the people behind me. I am a customer of this bank by acquisition, I said loud enough for the manager in the back office to hear. And until you run that number, you do not get to decide if I am worthless. Run the damn number, Kevin. Kevin stared at me, mouth slightly open. He looked at the security guard approaching from the corner, then back at me. He rolled his eyes and snatched the book off the counter. Fine, but when the system rejects it, you are leaving. Kevin pulled the keyboard closer with an exaggerated sigh of exhaustion. He did not even bother opening the standard customer service interface. Instead, he navigated to the archive search function, a black screen with green text that looked like it belonged in a museum. I am entering it exactly as it appears. He narrated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. OP-1965-G. He looked at me with a smug grin, his finger hovering over the enter key. Ready to go find another bank? He asked. Just press the button, I said, my patience wearing thin. He pressed it. He leaned back, crossing his arms and waiting for the inevitable invalid account notification to pop up so he could dismiss me. 1 second passed, then 2. Usually these systems are instant. But the cursor on the screen just blinked. A low hum started to rise from the computer tower beneath the desk. Kevin frowned. He tapped the enter key again, a little harder this time. Piece of junk, he muttered. It is probably frozen because the format is RAW. He stopped mid-sentence. The black screen did not just change, it exploded into color. A bright, aggressive crimson red filled the entire monitor, casting a harsh glow onto Kevin's pale face. There was no error message. There was no text saying, "Account not found." Instead, bold white text flashed in the center of the screen. Restricted access. Level 5. Security clearance required. Kevin froze. His smugness evaporated, instantly replaced by genuine confusion. He reached for the mouse to close the window, but the system was locked. He clicked frantically. Nothing happened. The red screen pulsed like a silent heartbeat of warning. What is this? Kevin whispered, his voice trembling slightly. What kind of account is this? I told you, I said, leaning closer to the glass, feeling a surge of adrenaline that made my knees weak. It is a savings account. No, Kevin stammered, backing away from the counter as if the computer might bite him. Savings accounts do not lock the terminal. This is a government-level lock. Suddenly, a loud, sharp beep cut through the quiet hum of the lobby. It came from his computer. Then another beep. Then a continuous, high-pitched tone that made the customers in the line behind me cover their ears. "Turn it off!" the woman behind me yelled. "I cannot!" Kevin shouted back, panic rising in his voice. He was typing furiously now, trying to override the command, but the screen changed again. New words appeared, scrolling rapidly across the red background. System lockdown initiated. Notify branch manager immediately. Do not permit account holder to leave. Kevin read the words and his eyes went wide. He looked at me, then at the heavy glass doors at the entrance. The realization hit him. He was not dealing with a beggar. He was dealing with something far above his pay grade. He slammed his hand down on the silent alarm button under the desk. I heard the heavy magnetic locks on the main lobby doors engage with a dull thud. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly from annoyance to fear. "Stay right there," Kevin ordered, his voice cracking. He was not looking at me with contempt anymore. He was looking at me like I was a dangerous variable he could not control. "Do not move." I stood my ground, my hands gripping the edge of the marble counter. My grandfather was not a liar. He was not a failure. He had planted a seed in 1965 that had grown into something so powerful the system was terrified to acknowledge it. And now I was the one shaking the branches. The heavy thud of the magnetic locks echoed through the lobby like a gunshot. The pleasant background jazz cut out immediately, replaced by a suffocating silence. Customers stopped mid-sentence, coffee cups frozen halfway to their mouths. A woman near the entrance pushed against the glass doors, but they would not budge. The lobby had gone from a place of commerce to a prison in less than 3 seconds. I stood frozen at the counter, my hands trembling over the cold marble. Kevin had backed away as far as his rolling chair would take him, his eyes wide and fixed on me like I was holding a weapon. Then the door to the large glass office in the back corner flew open. A man burst out. This had to be the manager, Mr. Henderson. He was an older black man, in an immaculate gray suit, but right now he looked like he had seen a ghost. His tie was slightly askew and beads of sweat were already glistening on his forehead. He did not walk. He sprinted across the polished floor with an urgency that sent a wave of panic through the room. "Secure the perimeter," he shouted, his voice cracking with an intensity that made everyone jump. "Get the shutters down, now." Metal security grates began to descend over the large windows with a mechanical grinding noise, blocking out the morning sun. The bank was turning into a fortress in real time. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it might bruise them. This was it. This was the moment my life ended. I was not just being kicked out, I was being detained. My mother's voice rang in my head. Trash, failure, criminal. She would love this. She would probably frame the mugshot. I did not do anything, I whispered, but my voice was too small to be heard over the chaos. I looked around for an exit, but the security guards were already moving, hands hovering near their holsters. They were not looking at the robbers who usually storm banks. They were looking at me, a librarian in a thrift store cardigan. Mr. Henderson reached the teller station, skidding to a halt. He did not even acknowledge Kevin. He slammed his hands onto the counter, leaning over the glass to look at the computer screen. The aggressive red light from the monitor reflected in his glasses, turning his eyes into glowing orbs of panic. He read the scrolling text. Level 5 security clearance. Founding partner protocol. The color drained from his face, leaving his skin with an ashy gray undertone. He looked up at me. His breathing was shallow and rapid, his chest heaving. "Who gave you this?" he demanded, his voice low and trembling. He pointed a shaking finger at the blue passbook still sitting on the counter. "Where did you get this book?" "It is my grandfather's," I stammered instinctively, raising my hands slowly in the air, a reflex learned from a lifetime of watching the news. "Otis Vance. I just wanted to check the balance. I did not know it was restricted. Please, I will just leave." Henderson ignored my plea. He grabbed the phone on the desk, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the receiver. He punched in a code, not a standard number. "This is Henderson at Maine. Code red. We have a trigger event. The asset has surfaced. Get the police here, not the patrol units. Get the special response team. Yes, immediately." He slammed the phone down and looked at the security guards. "Nobody comes in or out. If anyone tries to enter, you lock this place down tight. Do not let her leave this counter." I felt the tears, hot and stinging, in my eyes. Special response team. For a passbook, I was going to prison for fraud. I had walked into a trap set 40 years ago, and now the steel jaws were snapping shut. I looked at the exit, measuring the distance, but I knew it was hopeless. I was trapped in a cage of glass and marble, waiting for the handcuffs to click. Blue and red lights flashed against the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, turning the lobby into a disorienting strobe light of panic. Sirens wailed outside, getting louder and closer, until they cut off abruptly, signaling that the vehicles had parked right at the curb. I counted 3 cruisers. Then an armored tactical truck screeched to a halt behind them. My stomach dropped to the floor. This was not a standard response to a bounced check or a forged signature. This was a siege. I backed away from the counter until my shoulders hit the cold plaster of the wall. My breathing came in short, jagged gasps. I looked at Kevin, the teller. He was hiding under his desk now, peeking out with wide, terrified eyes. The security guards were shouting orders at the few customers remaining, herding them into a corner like cattle. But their guns were not pointed at the customers. They were still watching me. I squeezed my eyes shut, and suddenly I was 12 years old again. I was standing in my mother's living room, tears streaming down my face as Beatrice pointed at a missing $20 bill on the table. "Thieves are not born, Aaliyah. They are made," she had said, calling the local sheriff just to scare me straight. I had not taken the money. Dominique had stolen it to buy lip gloss. But I was the one who sat in the back of a squad car for an hour while the neighbors watched. That old familiar terror clawed at my throat. As a black woman in America, the sight of tactical gear and drawn weapons does not signal safety. It signals danger. It signals that your life is about to be debated in milliseconds. I was going to be another headline. Woman shot inside bank over disputed savings account. My mother would probably give an interview saying she always knew I was troubled. The heavy glass doors hissed open. A team of officers in heavy vests swarmed into the lobby. Police hands. "Where we can see them," a voice boomed. I slowly raised my hands, trembling so hard I could barely keep them steady. "I am unarmed," I whispered, though I knew they could not hear me. "I just wanted to check a balance. Please do not shoot." I pressed my back harder against the wall, trying to make myself invisible, trying to disappear before the inevitable violence. But then something strange happened. Mr. Henderson ran out from behind the counter. He did not run away from the police. He ran toward them, waving his arms frantically. "Stand down!" he yelled, his voice cracking with desperation. "Do not engage the target. I repeat, do not engage." The lead officer stopped, lowering his rifle slightly. "Mr. Henderson, you called in a code red." "Yes, but not for her," Henderson shouted, pointing at me. The officer turned his gaze toward me. I flinched, expecting the barrel of the gun to rise. Instead, the officer signaled to his team. "Secure the perimeter. Form a protective detail around the civilian." I opened my eyes. 4 officers were moving toward me. They did not grab me. They did not throw me to the ground. They turned their backs to me, forming a human wall between me and the rest of the lobby. They were not arresting me. They were guarding me. Miss Vance Henderson approached slowly, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. He looked terrified, but not of me. He was terrified for me. "I need you to breathe. You are not under arrest, but we cannot let you leave, not until we verify the protocol." "What protocol?" I choked out, my voice barely a squeak. "Why are there guns?" "Because," Henderson said, wiping sweat from his brow, "that passbook is not just an account. It is a key, and anyone holding it is the most high-value target in this city right now." I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the cold metal of handcuffs to snap around my wrists. I held my breath, bracing for the shove against the wall or the harsh command to get on the ground. But seconds ticked by and the violence never came. Instead, the aggressive shouting of the officers shifted into low, disciplined commands that sounded less like a raid and more like a military escort. "Clear the sector. Secure the exits. We have the VIP in custody. Repeat, we have the assets secured." I opened one eye. The officer who had been aiming his rifle at my chest had lowered his weapon. He did not step away. He turned his back to me. He and 3 other tactical officers formed a tight outward-facing circle around me. Their shoulders were tense, their eyes scanning the terrified customers and staff in the lobby. They were not trapping me, they were shielding me. I was standing in the eye of a storm I did not understand. Ms. Vance. The voice was soft, trembling slightly. I looked through the gap between two officers. Mr. Henderson was standing there. He was no longer the imperious bank manager who had ordered the lockdown. He looked humbled, almost frightened. He smoothed his suit jacket and took a slow, respectful step toward me. He did not loom over me. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of deference that felt completely alien in this cold corporate lobby. "I am so sorry for the scene, Ms. Vance," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Please forgive the aggressive response. This is not how we usually welcome our most priority clients, but the system leaves us no choice." I stared at him, my hands still trembling in the air. Clients. Priority clients. I looked at my worn-out sneakers and my cardigan. I looked at Kevin the teller, who was peeking out from under his desk with his mouth hanging open. "Mr. Henderson," I whispered, my throat dry. "I do not understand. Am I going to jail? Did I break the law?" Henderson shook his head vigorously. "No, Ms. Vance. You did not break any laws. You triggered the founding partner protocol." He gestured to the blue passbook still sitting on the marble counter behind the blast-proof glass. "That book contains a level 5 asset code. It has not been active since 1965. When a code of that magnitude surfaces after decades of dormancy, our security system automatically assumes the holder is in immediate danger." "Danger?" I asked, finally lowering my hands. "Danger from who?" "From anyone who knows what that book represents," Henderson said gravely. "Assets of this nature attract wolves." "Ms. Vance, the protocol is designed to freeze the facility and summon protection until we can verify your identity and secure the physical asset. You are not the threat. You are the vault," he signaled to the lead officer. "Captain, please escort Ms. Vance to the executive suite on the 30th floor. Use the private elevator. The lobby is not safe for a conversation of this magnitude." The officers moved in unison. "Let us move." The captain said, his voice firm but polite. "Stay in the center of the formation, Ms. Vance. Do not stop walking until we reach the secure lift." I nodded numbly. As I walked across the lobby surrounded by a phalanx of armed men, I caught a glimpse of myself in the reflection of the glass doors. I looked small and terrified, but the way everyone else was looking at me, the tellers, the customers, the security guards, was different. They were looking at me like I was made of gold. I reached out and grabbed the rusted tin box from my tote bag, holding it tight against my chest. "Grandpa Otis, what did you leave me? And why is the whole world suddenly afraid of a retired postman?" The executive suite on the 30th floor was a different world. The chaos of the lobby felt like a distant memory, replaced by the hush of thick carpet and the panoramic view of the city skyline. Mr. Henderson poured a glass of water from a crystal pitcher and placed it in front of me. His hands were shaking slightly. He sat down opposite me at the mahogany conference table, placing the rusted tin box between us like it was a holy relic. "Drink some water, Ms. Vance," he said gently. "You look like you are in shock." "I am in shock," I whispered, taking a sip. My hands were still trembling. "Mr. Henderson, please tell me what is going on. You said my grandfather was a partner, but that is impossible. Grandpa Otis was a mail carrier. He delivered letters for 40 years. He clipped coupons. He drove a 20-year-old truck. We were not rich." Henderson smiled, a sad, knowing smile. He opened a leather folder and pulled out a photocopy of an old black-and-white photograph. It showed a group of men standing in front of a small brick building with the sign, "Liberty Community Savings." In the back row, wearing a modest suit and a hat, was my grandfather. He looked young, strong, and determined. "Your grandfather was a mail carrier, yes," Henderson began. "But in 1965, he was also a visionary. Do you know what was happening in this city? In 65, Ms. Vance, the civil rights movement was at its peak. Black-owned businesses were being firebombed. Banks were refusing to lend to us. Liberty Community Savings was the only financial lifeline for the black community in this district, and it was on the verge of collapse. He tapped the photo. The original investors got scared. The white banks were squeezing them out. They wanted to liquidate. If they had closed, hundreds of families would have lost their homes, small businesses would have vanished, the community would have been crushed. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. Everyone was pulling their money out in a panic. Everyone except Otis Vance. On July 4th, 1965, your grandfather walked into that failing bank. He did not withdraw a cent. Instead, he emptied his life savings. Every dollar he had earned from carrying mail in the snow and the heat. He put it all on the counter. I stared at the photo, at the man I thought I knew. He did not just deposit money. Henderson continued. He bought the debt. He bought the risk. When the other partners ran, he bought their shares for pennies on the dollar. He essentially funded the bank's survival single-handedly. He told the board, "I believe in us when nobody else does." I felt tears pricking my eyes again. Why didn't he tell anyone, I asked? Why did we live like that? Because it was 1965, Henderson said, his voice dropping. A black man with that kind of leverage was a target. He asked to remain a silent partner, a ghost. He took his dividends in stock reinvestment, not cash. He let the interest compound for 50 years. He let the bank grow, merge, and eventually be acquired by First National. Henderson pointed to the blue passbook. This book is the only physical record of that original transaction. The founding partner shares. They are immune to dilution. They are immune to standard market fluctuations. Your grandfather was not just a customer, Ms. Vance. For the last 5 decades, he has been the largest individual shareholder of this financial institution. He did not leave you a savings account. He left you the bank. I sat there blinking at the man across the table. The words founding partner were still bouncing around inside my skull like loose change in a dryer. I looked down at the passbook. It was just paper and ink. It smelled like old attic dust. It did not look like power. It did not look like leverage. Mr. Henderson leaned back in his leather chair and steepled his fingers. I can see you are struggling to process this, Miss Vance. And frankly, I do not blame you. Otis was a master at misdirection. He knew that in his time, wealth was a target on a black man's back, so he hid it in plain sight. He reached into the leather folder again and pulled out a map. It was a survey map of the downtown financial district. Several blocks were outlined in thick red ink. You are probably wondering about the balance, Henderson said. You came here expecting maybe a few $1,000s. Enough for a used car or a down payment on an apartment. I nodded dumbly. I was hoping for enough to pay my rent so my mother could not kick me out. Henderson chuckled, but there was no humor in it, only a sort of awed respect. Otis did not leave you cash, Ms. Vance. Cash depreciates. Cash gets spent. Otis left you equity. When he bought out the other partners, he structured the deal so that his shares were converted into real estate holdings held in a blind trust. He pointed a pen at the map. You see this building we are sitting in? The First National Tower. Yes, I whispered. The trust owns the land under it, Henderson said calmly, and the land under the 3 office towers adjacent to it, and the parking structure across the street. My mouth went dry. I looked at the red lines on the map. They encompass the heart of the city's financial district. Every time a tenant pays rent in these buildings, every time a car parks in that garage, a percentage goes into the trust. Henderson continued. For 50 years that money has been compounding, reinvesting, growing. We are not talking about a savings account anymore. We are talking about a real estate empire. He slid a single sheet of paper across the polished mahogany table. It was a valuation summary. At the bottom was a number in bold print. I stared at it. I counted the zeros. I counted them again because my brain refused to accept the math. $45 million. I think I stopped breathing. The room started to spin slowly. 45 million. My mother had thrown this in the trash because she thought it was garbage. She had threatened to make me homeless over a box worth $45 million. This is a conservative estimate, Henderson added, his voice soft. The actual market value could be significantly higher depending on current commercial rates. And as the holder of the passbook, you are the sole beneficiary of the trust. You do not just have money, Ms. Vance, you have control. You are technically my boss's boss. I looked up at him. Does my mother know? Henderson shook his head. No. Otis was very specific. The existence of the trust was to be revealed only to the person who presented the physical passbook. If anyone else had come in without it, or if the book had been destroyed, the assets would have been donated to charity. He wanted to ensure that the wealth went to someone who valued his history, not just his money. I felt a sudden sharp laugh bubble up in my chest. It was hysterical. It was terrifying. Beatrice had been so obsessed with erasing her father's shameful past that she had literally thrown away a fortune. She had spent her whole life trying to be elite, while the man she looked down on owned the ground she walked on. So what happens now? I asked, my voice trembling. Now, Henderson said, closing the folder. We have to formalize the transfer. But I must warn you, Ms. Vance, a transfer of this magnitude triggers alerts, not just internal ones. He tapped the phone on the desk. The moment I entered that code into the system, it pinged the SEC and our major investors. People are going to know that the sleeping giant has woken up. And one of those people— he hesitated, looking at me with concern. One of the people monitoring our high-level asset flows is a senior analyst at a firm called Archer & Co. My blood ran cold. That was Brad's firm. Your brother-in-law, Henderson said, confirming my fear. He has access to the aggregate data. He won't know it is you yet, but he knows a massive asset just came online under the name Vance. And if I know men like him, he is already making calls. You are safe in this building, Ms. Vance. But the moment you step outside, the wolves will be waiting. Across the city, in the glass-walled hive of Archer & Company, the air was always set to a crisp 68 degrees. It was the temperature of money. Brad sat in his corner office, his feet resting on a desk that cost more than Aaliyah's entire education. He was feeling particularly satisfied. He had just shorted a tech stock that was tanking, and he was mentally calculating his bonus. The incident in the garage yesterday was already a distant memory, a funny anecdote he planned to tell at drinks later. Can you believe my wife's family kept a biscuit tin full of trash? It was pathetic, really. He took a sip of his double espresso and tapped his monitors. He had a custom algorithm running in the background, a program he called the Whale Monitor. It was designed to flag any massive movement of capital within the state's banking system. Usually it pinged when a tech CEO sold shares or a lottery winner cashed out. It was how he found new clients. He was a shark, and this was his radar for blood in the water. A sharp digital chime cut through the silence of his office. A red banner scrolled across his third monitor. Significant liquidity event detected. First National Bank main branch. Brad sat up, dropping his feet to the floor. First National, that was the big league. He clicked on the alert to expand the details. The system was pulling metadata from the clearinghouse. Asset type legacy blind trust / commercial real estate holdings. Trigger physical instrument presentation. Status active / unfrozen. Estimated valuation, $45 million USD. Brad whistled low and long. 45 million. That was a serious whale. He leaned in closer, his eyes scanning for the name of the lucky bastard who had just become the city's newest multi-millionaire. He scrolled down to the grantor field, Grantor Otis Vance. Originating institution, Liberty Community. Savings acquired 1980. The coffee cup slipped from Brad's hand. It hit the desk, splashing hot espresso over his expensive keyboard and onto his silk tie, but he did not move. He did not even blink. He stared at the name on the screen. Otis Vance, the garage, the dust, the rusted tin box, the blue book with the gold stamp. Liberty Community Savings. No, it was impossible. He had held that book in his hands less than 24 hours ago. He had laughed at it. He had called it a souvenir of failure. He had watched Beatrice throw it in the trash. His mind raced back to the code he had glimpsed on the cover but ignored. OP 1965 G. Original partner. He felt the blood drain from his face, leaving him cold and nauseous. They had thrown away $45 million. And worse, Aaliyah had picked it up. Aaliyah, the one they treated like a servant, was currently sitting on a fortune that could buy this entire building. Panic, sharp and electric, shot through his veins. If Aaliyah realized what she had, she was gone. She would lawyer up, she would disappear, and the family, his access to that money, would be cut off forever. He needed to stop her. He needed to intercept this before the ink was dry. He scrambled for his phone, his wet fingers slipping on the screen. He dialed Beatrice. "Pick up," he hissed, pacing around his office like a caged animal. "Pick up the phone, you stupid woman." Finally, she answered. "Brad, I am in the middle of a facial. This better be important." "Beatrice, listen to me very carefully," Brad said, his voice trembling with a mix of terror and greed. "Do not hang up. Do not ask questions. Where is Aaliyah?" "I do not know," Beatrice scoffed. "Probably crying in her hovel. I told her I'm cutting off the rent. I am teaching her a lesson." "Stop!" Brad shouted, making his assistant outside jump. "You are not cutting her off. You are going to call her right now. You are going to be the sweetest, most loving mother on the planet." "Excuse me." Beatrice sounded offended. "Have you lost your mind, Beatrice?" Brad whispered, staring at the number on his screen. "That box. The one we laughed at. It wasn't trash. I am looking at the bank data right now. Your father owned the land under the financial district. That book is worth $45 million. And if you do not get Aaliyah back in this family in the next hour, we lose everything." Brad slammed his Porsche into park right on the front lawn of the estate, not even bothering with the driveway. He burst through the double oak doors, his face slick with sweat, and eyes wild with a mixture of terror and adrenaline. Beatrice and Dominique were in the solarium. Beatrice was still in her silk robe, sipping cucumber water, while Dominique was editing a selfie. "45 million, Brad shouted before he even fully entered the room. He threw his briefcase onto the glass coffee table, shattering a crystal vase. The tea spilled everywhere, but nobody moved. Beatrice stared at him. "Brad, have you lost your mind? Look at my rug." "Forget the rug," Brad roared, his voice cracking. "Forget the house. Forget everything. I just got off the phone with my contact at the clearinghouse. That rusted box you threw in the trash. That bank that does not exist. It is a holding company, Beatrice. Your father owned the land under the financial district. The account Aaliyah is holding is worth $45 million. And that is just the liquid valuation." The room went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Dominique dropped her phone. Beatrice stood up slowly, her face draining of color. "You are lying," she whispered. "My father was a mailman. He died wearing shoes with holes in them." "He was a miser," Brad spat. "He was a genius miser who hated you enough to hide a fortune in a biscuit tin. And now Aaliyah has it." "Aaliyah, the girl you just evicted. The girl you told to sleep in the street. If she figures out what she has, she is going to lawyer up. And we will get nothing, not a single dime." Beatrice sank back onto the sofa. 45 million. Her eyes shifted rapidly, processing the number, calculating the clothes, the cars, the status. "That is my inheritance," she hissed, suddenly vicious. "I am his daughter. That money belongs to me. Aaliyah is just a stray. She has no right to it." "She has the passbook," Brad countered, pacing the room. "Possession is 9/10 of the law, especially with these old bearer instruments. If we fight her in court, it will take years. We will be exposed. No, we need a different approach." He stopped in front of Beatrice and grabbed her shoulders. "You need to get her back here. Or better yet, you need to go to her. You need to be the mother you never were. You need to cry, Beatrice. Can you do that? Can you cry for the daughter you despise?" Beatrice looked at him, She took a deep breath. She closed her eyes. When she opened them a moment later, they were wet with tears. Her lower lip quivered perfectly. "Oh, my poor Aaliyah," she said, her voice trembling with a terrifyingly convincing sorrow. "I was just so overcome with grief, Brad. I did not know what I was saying. I need my baby girl back." Brad nodded grimly. "Good. Keep that energy. Dominique, delete that live stream. Right now. Post a picture of you and Aaliyah from when you were kids. Caption it, 'Sisterhood is forever.'" Dominique was already tapping furiously on her screen. "Done. I will say I was hacked. I will say I was defending her from trolls." Brad opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of documents. He had printed them at the office before sprinting to his car. "These are standard trust management authorization forms. We tell her the tax burden is too high for a single individual. We tell her she needs family protection. We get her to sign power of attorney over to you, Beatrice, for the purpose of asset management. Once she signs, we transfer the assets into a joint account. Then we control the flow." Beatrice stood up, wiping the fake tears from her cheeks. She walked to the hallway mirror, checking her reflection. She messed up her perfect hair slightly, making herself look distraught. "Get the car, Brad," she commanded. "We are going to the bank. I am going to save my daughter. And then I am going to take back what is mine." My phone began to vibrate against the polished mahogany table, a harsh buzzing sound that shattered the stunned silence of the executive suite. I stared at the screen. The name Mom flashed in bright white letters. My stomach clenched. Just an hour ago, she had told me to sleep in the street. She had called me trash. I looked at Mr. Henderson. He was watching the phone too, his expression unreadable, but his warning about the wolves was still echoing in my ears. I reached out with a trembling hand and swiped accept. I expected screaming. I expected her to demand to know why I had not vacated the apartment yet. I braced myself for the venom. "Hello?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Aaliyah." "Oh, thank God. Baby girl, are you okay?" The voice on the other end was not the monster from the garage. It was the mother I had dreamed of having since I was 6 years old. It was soft, breathless, and dripping with concern. I held the phone away from my ear for a second, staring at it in confusion. Beatrice never called me baby girl. That was a name reserved for Dominique. "Mom," I asked, confused. "You told me never to come back. I know, and I am so sorry." Beatrice sounded like she was crying. "Listen to me, honey. I was out of my mind with grief. Losing your grandfather. It broke me, Aaliyah. I lashed out at you because you remind me so much of him. I was hurting, and I wanted to hurt everyone else. It was wrong." I felt a lump form in my throat. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. But Mr. Henderson was sitting across from me, tapping his fingers silently on the map of the real estate empire she had thrown away. "I do not know what to say, Mom," I said, guarding my heart. "You were pretty clear about the locks being changed. That is why I am calling." Beatrice interrupted hurriedly. "I went into your grandfather's room to pack his things, and I found something. A letter. It fell out of his old Bible. He wrote it years ago. He talked about how much he loved us, how he wanted us to be united. Aaliyah reading it. It woke me up. I realized I was throwing away the only family I have left over a stupid misunderstanding. A letter, I asked. Grandpa left a letter. Yes, and I want you to read it." Beatrice sniffled audibly. "I want us to start over. Please, baby girl. Do not let my anger destroy us. Where are you? Are you at the library?" I hesitated. I looked at Mr. Henderson. He narrowed his eyes and gave a slight shake of his head, advising caution. But this was my mother. She was apologizing. She was crying. The little girl inside me, who just wanted to be loved, pushed the billionaire heiress aside. "I am downtown," I said. "At the bank. The bank." Her voice spiked for a microsecond, sharp and alert, before smoothing back into sweetness. "Oh, checking on that old account." "That is fine, honey. Listen, Brad and Dominique are with me. We are in the city. We are coming to pick you up. We can go to lunch. Just the family. No screaming, no fighting. Just us. You are coming here, I asked, feeling a sudden wave of claustrophobia. We are already around the corner, she said. Stay right there. Do not leave. I need to hug you, Aaliyah. I need to make this right. I love you. She hung up before I could say another word. I lowered the phone, feeling dizzy. She said she loved me. She never said that. I looked at Mr. Henderson. She says she found a letter I told him. She wants to make amends. Henderson did not look convinced. He looked at the security monitors on the wall. Or Miss Vance, someone told her that the rusted tin box she threw away is worth a fortune, and she is coming to ensure it stays in the family. Be very careful. Coincidence is a luxury of the poor. The rich do not believe in it. 10 minutes later, the private elevator chimed. It was a soft, pleasant sound, but in the silence of the executive suite, it sounded like a gavel coming down on a death sentence. Mr. Henderson stood up, buttoning his suit jacket, his face set in a grim line of defense. I stayed seated, my hands gripping the arms of the leather chair so tight my knuckles turned white. The warning about the wolves was no longer a metaphor. They were at the door. The door slid open, and there they were. The wolf pack. But they did not look like predators. They looked like a catalog advertisement for the perfect American family. Beatrice was leading the charge. She had changed out of her severe funeral black into a soft, cream-colored suit that screamed maternal warmth and forgiveness. Her makeup was artfully smudged, just enough to suggest she had been crying in the car, but not enough to ruin her aesthetic. Dominique was right behind her, wearing oversized sunglasses indoors and holding a tissue to her nose. She looked fragile. She looked like a grieving sister. And bringing up the rear was Brad. He had ditched the tuxedo jacket for a crisp dress shirt with rolled-up sleeves, the universal uniform of a man ready to get to work and fix things. He looked like he was walking onto a trading floor. Shoulders back, chin up, radiating that specific kind of arrogance that comes from never being told no in his entire life. He walked straight past the executive assistant who tried to intercept them. "Sir, you cannot just walk in here," she protested, stepping in front of the glass doors. "This is a restricted area." Brad did not even break stride. He whipped out a leather wallet and flashed a gold identification badge from his firm. Brad Miller, Senior Analyst, Archer & Company. We are here for a medical and financial emergency involving a vulnerable family member. We have reason to believe she is being coerced. If you want to stop me, call your compliance officer and explain why you are obstructing a fiduciary intervention. The assistant froze. It was nonsense legalese, a word salad designed to intimidate low-level employees. But he said it with enough conviction to paralyze her. He pushed past her and held the door open for Beatrice. "Aaliyah!" Beatrice screamed my name like I had just returned from a war zone. She rushed across the room, ignoring Henderson completely. She threw her arms around me, pulling me into a hug that smelled of expensive perfume and desperation. "Oh, thank God you are safe. I was so worried, baby. I thought you were going to do something rash. I thought I lost you." I sat stiff as a board in her embrace. Her body was warm, but her eyes, when she pulled back, were cold and calculating. They darted instantly to the center of the table, to the rusted tin box, to the map, to the valuation paper. I saw her pupils dilate. She saw the number. She saw the 45 million. Dominique joined the hug, squeezing my arm. "We were so scared, Aaliyah," she chirped, her voice trembling. "Brad said you might be having a mental break from the grief. We just want to help you." Brad walked around the table and stood behind my chair, placing his hands on my shoulders. It felt heavy, like a yoke. It felt like a trap closing. "Mr. Henderson, I presume," Brad said, staring down at the bank manager with a predatory smile. "I am Brad Miller. I manage the Vance family portfolio. We appreciate you keeping Aaliyah safe during her episode, but we will take it from here. You can clear the room now. We have private family business to discuss." Henderson did not blink. "I am afraid I cannot do that, Mr. Miller. This is a secure meeting regarding a level 5 asset. Only the account holder can authorize your presence. Brad squeezed my shoulders hard, painfully hard. Aaliyah wants us here. Do not you, Aaliyah. He leaned down, his breath hot against my ear. Tell him, Aaliyah. Tell him we are family. Tell him before things get complicated. Brad, stop it, you are scaring her. Beatrice pushed Brad aside gently but firmly. She pulled a leather chair right up to mine, so close our knees were touching. She reached out and cupped my face in her hands. Her palms were soft and warm, and for a second I leaned into the touch. It was the touch I had craved my entire life. The touch I used to watch her give Dominique while I stood in the doorway unnoticed. Look at me, Aaliyah, she said, her eyes swimming with tears that looked so real they broke my heart. Do not listen to the lawyers. Do not listen to the bankers. Listen to your mother. I know I have been hard on you. I know I have pushed you away. But do you know why? I shook my head, unable to speak. The lump in my throat was suffocating me. Because I was terrified, she whispered, letting a single tear track down her perfectly powdered cheek. When your father left us, I promised myself I would never let anyone hurt my girls again. I built a wall around us, Aaliyah. I became hard so you would not have to be. And when I saw you holding that old tin box, God, it just brought it all back. The poverty, the struggle, the fear that we would lose everything we built. She took my hand and squeezed it. Do you remember when you were 7 and you had that terrible pneumonia? The doctors said you might not make it. I sat by your bed for 3 nights straight without sleeping. I held your hand just like this. I promised God that if He saved you, I would do whatever it took to give you a good life. I remembered being sick. But in my memory, it was Grandpa Otis who sat by the bed reading me stories while Beatrice was at a gala. But looking at her now, seeing the pain in her eyes, my memory started to blur. Maybe she was there. Maybe I had been wrong about her all along. The guilt washed over me like a cold wave. She was my mother. She had sacrificed for me. And here I was, sitting on a fortune, ready to cut her out. Mr. Henderson tried to speak. Miss Vance, I must advise you that Beatrice cut him off without even looking at him. Hush now. This is a moment between a mother and her daughter. She turned back to me, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Aaliyah, we are at a crossroads. This money, it is a blessing, but it is also a curse. It destroyed my relationship with my father. Do not let it destroy ours. We cannot let strangers manage this. They do not love you. They only see the fees. We are your blood. She reached out and rested her hand on the rusted tin box covering the faded blue passbook. We can fix this baby girl. We can secure your future and Dominique's future. We can finally be the family you always wanted us to be. But we have to do it together. Do not shut me out, please. Just let us help you carry this burden. I looked at her pleading eyes. Then I looked at Dominique, who gave me a wobbling, hopeful smile. The lonely child inside me was screaming to say yes, to sign whatever they wanted just to keep this feeling of belonging alive. I felt my resolve crumbling. Maybe Mr. Henderson was wrong. Maybe they really did love me. Dominique squeezed my hand harder, her manicured nails digging into my skin. She pulled out her phone, the same phone she had used to humiliate me less than 24 hours ago. She unlocked the screen and shoved it in my face. I looked at the image. It was a Zillow listing for a sprawling beachfront compound in Martha's Vineyard. 8 bedrooms, private dock, infinity pool, price tag $12 million. You know, I felt terrible about the garage, Aaliyah. Dominique said, her voice breathless with excitement. I only streamed it because I wanted a record. I was documenting your crisis in case we needed to show a therapist. I was scared for you. I thought you were having a breakdown over a box of trash. But now that we know it is a fortune, I deleted everything. I scrubbed it all. She swiped to the next photo on her phone, showing a marble kitchen that was larger than my entire apartment. This is what Grandpa wanted for us, Aaliyah. He wanted us to have a legacy. We can buy this place cash. We can call it the Vance family estate. I can already see us there for Christmas. Mom in the kitchen, you reading in the library, and Brad and I handling the maintenance. It will be our sanctuary. I stared at her. The audacity was breathtaking. Yesterday I was not allowed to sit at the main table because my dress was from a discount rack. Today she was planning my real estate portfolio. She was not asking if I wanted a house. She was telling me where we were going to live. The word "we" was doing a lot of heavy lifting. "And look at the guest house," she chirped, swiping again. "It is perfect for you, Aaliyah. It is detached so you can have your privacy and your books, but you will still be close to the main house where the family gathers." The guest house. Even in her fantasy of spending my money, I was still relegated to the servants' quarters. I was still the outsider, just with a better view. Brad nodded approvingly, looking over her shoulder. "It is a solid investment, Aaliyah. Real estate in the vineyard never depreciates. It is exactly the kind of asset diversification we need to offset the commercial holdings in the trust. Dominique has a great eye for value." He looked at Mr. Henderson, who was watching this display with a look of pure disgust. "See, Henderson, this is why family needs to be involved. Aaliyah is overwhelmed. She needs her sister to help her visualize the potential. She needs us to turn these abstract numbers into a life she can actually enjoy." Dominique dropped the phone onto the table right on top of the valuation documents. She looked at me with wide, shimmering eyes. "We can finally be happy, Aaliyah. No more fighting over money. No more stress. Just us living the life Grandpa wanted. You do not want to be alone with all this cash, do you? You do not want to be a target for strangers. We are your safe harbor." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Just sign the papers, baby. Let Brad handle the boring stuff so we can start shopping. I already have a vision board for the living room. It is going to be magnificent." I looked at the picture of the $12 million house. I looked at my sister, who had never worked a day in her life, but felt entitled to a mansion. She did not see a gift. She saw an ATM. And she was punching in her PIN code right on my heart. The scary part was that for a split second, the image of us all together by the ocean was so seductive, I almost picked up the pen. Almost. Dominique's fantasy of the beach house hung in the air, a shimmering mirage of the life I had always been denied. I looked at the Zillow listing one last time before Brad reached across the table and gently turned the phone over face down. The smile vanished from his face, replaced by the serious, furrowed brow of a man burdened by heavy responsibilities. "We can have all of that," Aaliyah, Brad said, his voice dropping an octave to sound authoritative. "But first, we need to talk about the reality of your situation." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick document bound in a blue folder. He slid it across the mahogany table until it rested right next to the rusted tin box. $45 million is not a lottery win," he continued, leaning forward. "It is a tax liability event. Do you understand what capital gains tax is, Aaliyah? Do you understand the difference between a revocable and an irrevocable trust structure? Because if you walk out of here today without a strategy, the IRS is going to eat you alive. They will take 40% right off the top. Then the state takes their cut. By the time you actually see a dime, you will have lost half the principal." I blinked, feeling the panic rising again. I worked in a library. I organized archives. I didn't know anything about tax brackets or capital gains. Brad saw the hesitation in my eyes and pounced. "Look, Aaliyah, you are smart. You know books. You know history. But this is high-frequency asset management. This is a Shark Tank. If you try to manage this portfolio yourself, you are going to be targeted by scammers, lawsuits, and worst of all, bureaucratic mismanagement. You could lose everything in a year. Grandpa Otis built this, but he is gone. It is up to us to protect it." He opened the blue folder to the last page where a yellow sticky note marked a signature line. "That is why I had my legal team draft this. It is a standard family asset protection agreement. It simply appoints me as the primary fiduciary. It allows me to shelter the money in offshore accounts, minimize the tax hit, and set up a monthly allowance for you. You won't have to worry about a thing. You just enjoy the beach house and I handle the headache." He clicked a heavy gold pen and held it out to me. Beatrice nodded encouragingly, her hand still resting on my arm. "It is for your own good, baby girl," she whispered. "You do not want the government taking Grandpa's money, do you? Brad is a professional. Let him do his job." I looked at the pen. It was gleaming under the office lights. It looked like a weapon. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat loudly. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice cutting through the fog of their pressure, "I must inform you that the bank offers these same services at a much lower fee and with full transparency. You are under no obligation to sign third-party agreements." Brad whipped his head around, his eyes flashing with genuine anger. "This is a family matter, Henderson. Back off." He turned back to me, his expression softening instantly into fake concern. "See, Aaliyah. The bank wants their cut too. Everyone wants a piece of you. Only family has your back. Just sign the paper, and we walk out of here together, rich, safe, and united." He pressed the pen into my hand. My fingers closed around it. It felt cold. The paper was right there. All I had to do was sign my name, and the fear of being poor, the fear of being alone, it would all go away. Brad watched me. His breath held, his eyes locked on the tip of the pen. He was so close to the money he could taste it. I could see the greed vibrating off him like heat waves. The gold pen felt heavier than a brick in my hand. I looked down at the dotted line on the blue document. It was just a signature, just my name written in ink. But it felt like I was standing on a bridge watching the fog clear. On the other side was my mother smiling at me with genuine pride. On the other side was Dominique actually wanting to spend time with me instead of treating me like a photo prop. On the other side was a family dinner where I was not the punchline. I felt a desperate ache in the center of my chest. It was the old wound, the one that opened every time Beatrice forgot my birthday or criticized my hair. Signing this paper would stitch that wound closed. If I gave them the money, they would have to love me. They would have to keep me close because I was the golden goose. It was a transactional love, but in that moment, I was so hungry for connection, I was willing to pay the price. Beatrice leaned in, her cheek brushing against my hair. "Do it, baby girl," she whispered. "Do it so we can go home. We will stop and get ice cream on the way. Just like we used to. We never used to get ice cream." She was rewriting history, and I was letting her. I lowered the pen, the tip hovering millimeters above the paper. "Ms. Vance, stop." Mr. Henderson's voice was sharp, cutting through the warm haze Beatrice had spun around me. He was standing up, his hands pressed flat on the table. "Do not sign that document," he said firmly. "I cannot let you do this without explaining Clause 4. Brad slammed his hand down on the table, making the water pitcher jump. "You are done talking, Henderson." "I am not done." Henderson shot back, ignoring Brad and looking straight at me. "Aaliyah, listen to me. Clause 4 grants him irrevocable power of attorney. That means once you sign this, he can liquidate the assets without your permission. He can sell the land. He can drain the accounts. He can move every cent to an offshore shell company, and you will not be able to stop him. You are not signing a management deal. You are signing a surrender." Beatrice stiffened beside me. Her hand on my shoulder tightened, turning from a caress into a claw. Brad stood up to his full height, looming over the bank manager. "That is enough. I am going to have your license for this. This is tortious interference with a private family contract. You are a banker, not her lawyer. If you say one more word to my client, I will sue this branch into the ground, and I will personally see to it that you are fired before lunch. Do you hear me, Henderson? I will destroy you." The threat hung heavy in the air. Henderson looked at Brad, then at the security guards who were watching nervously. He knew Brad had the connections to make good on that threat. He slowly sank back into his chair, his face pale, but his eyes were pleading with me. He had done all he could. The rest was up to me. Brad turned back to me, smoothing his tie. "See, Aaliyah. He is just trying to scare you because he wants the commission fees for the bank. He does not care about you. We do. We are family. He tapped the signature line again. Just sign it, Aaliyah. Let us get out of here. I looked at Henderson, who looked defeated. I looked at my mother, who looked expectant. The little girl inside me, who was terrified of being abandoned again, took over. I pressed the pen to the paper. The black ink bled into the white fiber, forming the first loop of my name. The black ink was still wet on the page when the heavy double doors of the executive suite crashed open. It was not a polite knock. It was an invasion. 3 men and 2 women in charcoal suits strode into the room, moving with the synchronized precision of a hit squad. They carried leather folios and radiated an air of absolute terrifying authority. Step away from the document. The lead attorney, a tall man with silver hair and eyes like flint, barked the order. He did not shout, but his voice carried a weight that made the air in the room freeze. Brad spun around, his face flushing a deep crimson. Who the hell are you? This is a private meeting. Get out before I call security. I am security, Mr. Miller. The silver-haired man walked straight to the table and placed his hand firmly over the blue folder covering my half-written signature. I am Arthur Sterling, General Counsel for First National Bank, and these are my associates. We are here to enforce the protective covenants of the Otis Vance Trust. He looked down at me, his expression softening just a fraction. Ms. Vance put the pen down. You are under no obligation to sign anything. In fact, I strongly advise against it. Brad stepped forward, trying to use his physical size to intimidate Sterling. It did not work. Sterling looked at him like he was a stain on the carpet. Listen here, Sterling. Brad spat, his voice shaking with rage. I am a senior analyst at Archer & Company. This is my client and my family. We are executing a standard asset management agreement. You have no jurisdiction here. I have every jurisdiction, Sterling replied coolly. You are on First National property attempting to transfer control of a Level 5 restricted asset. Under Banking Regulation 12 Section C, we have a fiduciary duty to ensure the beneficiary is acting of her own free will and with full understanding of the asset's structure. He picked up the blue folder and flipped it shut, pulling it away from me. Furthermore, this document you drafted is predatory. I glanced at Clause 4 while walking in. It waives the beneficiary's right to audit. That is not standard family protection, Mr. Miller. That is theft. Beatrice gasped, clutching her pearls. How dare you? We love Aaliyah. We are just trying to help her. Sterling turned his gaze to my mother. His eyes were cold enough to freeze water. Madam, we have reviewed the security footage from the garage. We know exactly how much you love your daughter, and we know you threw this asset in the trash. Brad slammed his fist on the table. That footage is private property. You are violating privacy laws. I will sue this bank for everything it has. Go ahead, Sterling challenged, crossing his arms. But before you file that suit, you might want to explain to the State Bar why you are coercing a distressed client into signing an irrevocable power of attorney without independent legal representation. That is a disparable offense, Brad. Do you want to lose your license today? Brad froze. The threat was real. He looked at the team of lawyers behind Sterling, then at Mr. Henderson, who was watching with a grim satisfaction. Brad was outgunned. He knew it. Sterling turned back to me. Ms. Vance, the bank provides independent counsel for founding partner beneficiaries. We can review this document line by line with you right now. If it is truly in your best interest, we will approve it. If not, we will shred it. What would you like to do? I looked at the pen in my hand. I looked at Brad, who was sweating. I looked at the blue folder that Sterling was holding out of reach. The spell was broken. The fog of Beatrice's fake love was lifting, and the sharp reality of what almost happened was setting in. I set the pen down. I would like to review it, I said, my voice steadying. Line by line. Brad's face went pale. No, Aaliyah, he pleaded, his voice losing its arrogant edge. We do not need them. They will just complicate things. Just trust me. I trusted you yesterday, I said, looking him dead in the eye. And you told me I was holding garbage. Mr. Sterling, please proceed. Brad did not back down. Instead, he let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded more like a bark. He walked around the table until he was standing directly behind Beatrice's chair, placing his hands protectively on her shoulders. He looked at Sterling with a smirk that was equal parts arrogance and pity. "You want to talk about the law, Sterling? Let us talk about the law. Specifically, let us talk about the laws of intestacy in this state." He paused for effect, looking around the room to ensure everyone was listening. Otis Vance died without a will. We have searched every record. There is no filed testament, no estate plan, nothing. In the absence of a will, the law is crystal clear. The estate passes in its entirety to the surviving next of kin. That is his biological daughter, Beatrice Vance. Brad squeezed Beatrice's shoulders and she sat up straighter, emboldened by his argument. "Aaliyah is a grandchild," Brad continued, his voice dripping with condescension. "Under the probate code, she has zero claim to the estate while a direct child is living. That passbook she is holding, it is just a piece of paper. It is memorabilia. It is a souvenir. It has no more legal weight than a photo album or a set of old golf clubs. Possession of a receipt does not equal ownership of the asset, Sterling. You know that." He walked over to me, leaning down until his face was inches from mine. His cologne was overpowering. "You are not the owner, Aaliyah. You are just the finder. You found Beatrice's money. If you try to claim this account, you are not just confused, you are committing conversion. You are stealing from your mother. And Mr. Sterling here knows it. He is just hoping to bill the account for legal fees before the probate court hands it over to us." I looked at Sterling. I expected him to object, to shout, to throw Brad out. But the lawyer just stood there, his face unreadable, his eyes fixed on Brad. The silence stretched out, agonizing and heavy. My heart began to hammer against my ribs again. Was Brad right? Was I just holding a useless relic? Beatrice stood up. Her voice was no longer sweet. It was sharp and commanding, the voice of the woman who had thrown the tin box in the trash. "Brad is right," she declared. "That money is mine, Aaliyah. I am the one who suffered through his poverty. I am the one who endured his embarrassment. I am the heir. You are just a guest in this family, and guests do not dictate the finances. Give me the book." She held out her hand, palm up, expectant. Brad crossed his arms, looking at the bank's legal team with a triumphant sneer. "The law is on our side, Sterling. You can hand over control voluntarily, or we can get a court order and sue you for damages. But either way, that money is coming home with us today." I felt the room shrinking. The logic seemed sound. If Grandpa did not write a will, then the natural order took over. And in the natural order of my family, I was always at the bottom. I looked down at the faded blue passbook. It felt heavy in my hands, but maybe it was just dead weight. Maybe I had walked into a war I was destined to lose simply because of biology. The lawyer's silence was brief, a mere pause to inhale before responding to Brad's legal posturing, but to my mother it looked like defeat. She saw the hesitation. She saw me staring at the passbook with doubt clouding my eyes, and she lost her patience. The mask of the grieving, affectionate mother didn't just slip, it disintegrated. The transformation was so abrupt, so violent, that it felt like the air pressure in the room had suddenly dropped. Beatrice lunged. She didn't reach for my hand. She reached for my throat metaphorically with a voice that could strip paint. "Give me the damn pen!" She shrieked the words, her voice shredding the hushed professional atmosphere of the executive suite. She snatched the gold pen Brad had left on the table and jabbed it toward my face, the tip coming dangerously close to my eye. "Stop staring at it like an idiot and sign the paper. Aaliyah. We do not have all day for your little moral crisis." I recoiled, pressing my spine into the leather chair, my heart seizing in my chest. The woman who had just offered me ice cream and a fresh start was gone. In her place was the tyrant who had terrorized my childhood, the woman who used humiliation as a parenting tool. Her eyes were bulging, the veins in her neck throbbing against her pearls. "Mom," I whispered the word, feeling like ash in my mouth. "Do not you. Mom, Me, she spat, leaning over the table, her spittle flying onto the polished mahogany. Who do you think you are? You are a librarian, Aaliyah. You stamp books for minimum wage. You live in a shoebox. You think you can handle $45 million. You think you deserve it. She laughed, a cruel barking sound that echoed off the glass walls. You are nothing. You have always been nothing. You are just a placeholder until the real adults step in. That money is mine. My father owed it to me for the miserable childhood he gave me, and you are trying to swallow it whole, you ungrateful, greedy little parasite. Brad stepped forward, looking genuinely alarmed. Even he realized she was torching the bridge they were trying to cross. Beatrice, calm down. Let's keep this civil. Shut up, Brad. She turned on him wild-eyed. I am done being civil. I am done begging this charity case to do the right thing. She is stealing from us. She is stealing my future. Your future. Dominique's house. Look at her. She pointed a shaking finger at me, her face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. You think you are special because you dug a tin can out of the garbage? You are just a thief. Now sign the paper and give me back my inheritance before I drag you out of this bank by your hair. The room went dead silent. The violence of her outburst hung in the air like toxic smoke. The bank lawyers looked horrified. Dominique was staring at her shoes, but I was looking at her, really looking at her. There was no love there. There never had been. The baby girl, the tears, the memories of me being sick, it was all a performance, a script written by greed and directed by desperation. She didn't want a daughter, she wanted a signature. She didn't want to save me. She wanted to rob me. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. The sound was calm, precise, and dangerous. Mrs. Vance, he said, stepping between us, his body blocking her line of sight to me. I believe you just proved my point about coercion better than any legal argument I could have made. I do not care what you think. Beatrice screamed, slamming her hand on the table. She is my daughter. I own her. You do not own anyone, I said. My voice was quiet, but for the first time in 32 years it didn't shake. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. The umbilical cord of guilt that had tethered me to her abuse for so long had finally snapped. I stood up, meeting her gaze over Mr. Sterling's shoulder. And I am not signing anything. Beatrice's mouth fell open. The air left the room. I had never defied a direct order from her, not once. But the Aaliyah who was afraid of her mother died the moment she called me a parasite. What did you say? Beatrice whispered, her voice dangerous and low. I said no, I repeated, feeling the power of the word coursing through me like electricity. I am not a thief, Mom, but you are. You tried to steal my dignity for a beach house. Well, the price just went up, and you cannot afford it. I looked at the woman standing across from me. Her chest was heaving, her face flushed with a rage that had nothing to do with maternal concern and everything to do with a lost transaction. For years I had chased her approval. I had starved myself of dignity just to get a crumb of her affection. But looking at her now, stripped of her pretense, I realized I was starving for something that did not exist. There was no mother here. There was only a predator who had missed her kill. A memory washed over me, sharp and clear. I was 10 years old, sitting on the front porch with Grandpa Otis. We were watching a squirrel hoard nuts for the winter. He had patted my hand, his palm rough and warm. Baby girl, he had said, remember this. The world is full of wolves, but the most dangerous ones do not howl at the moon. They sit at your dinner table. They eat your food and smile while they sharpen their knives. The biggest enemy is not outside the gate, Aaliyah. It is in the living room. I had not understood him then. I thought he was just being a grumpy old man. But he had seen this coming. He had seen her coming. He knew that the moment I had something of value, the people who treated me like furniture would suddenly treat me like a bank. I looked down at the gold pen resting in my hand. It was beautiful. It was heavy. It was the key to my prison cell. If I signed, I would be buying peace, but I would be selling my soul. I would be validating every cruel thing she had ever said to me. I would be agreeing that I was too small, too stupid, and too weak to manage my own destiny. My fingers loosened. I let gravity do the rest. The pen hit the polished mahogany table with a loud final clatter that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. It rolled away from me, spinning across the wood before coming to a stop in front of Brad. "I will not sign it," I said. My voice was not loud, but it was absolute. Beatrice blinked as if I had slapped her. Brad looked at the pen, then back at me, his face twisting into a mask of disbelief. "Aaliyah, be reasonable," Brad hissed, sweat beading on his upper lip. "You are making a mistake. You are emotional. You are not thinking clearly." "I am thinking clearly for the first time in my life," I replied. "I am thinking that a mother who throws her father's legacy in the trash does not get to manage it. I am thinking that a sister who only calls me when she needs a prop for social media does not get a beach house. And I am thinking that a brother-in-law who calls me a failure does not get a commission fee." I turned to Mr. Sterling. The silver-haired lawyer was watching me with a look of intense focus, perhaps even a flicker of respect. "Mr. Sterling," I said, keeping my back to my family, "please shred that document, and then I would like to discuss the terms of the trust with you. Alone." Beatrice let out a strangled sound, half gasp, half scream. "You ungrateful brat! You cannot do this to me. I am your mother." I turned back to her one last time. "No," I said softly. "You are just a woman who realized too late that she bet on the wrong horse. Goodbye, Beatrice." The silence that followed my declaration was heavy, but it did not last long. Mr. Henderson, who had been watching the exchange with the patience of a saint, finally moved. He did not look intimidated by Brad's legal threats or Beatrice's screaming. In fact, a small, cold smile played on his lips. It was the smile of a man who held a royal flush while his opponent was betting the farm on a pair of twos. "You are absolutely right," Mr. Miller Henderson said, his voice calm and level. "If Otis Vance had died intestate, his assets would indeed pass to his next of kin. That is the law. And for the last 5 years, that is exactly what you assumed happened. You assumed he was just a simple mail carrier who did not understand estate planning." Henderson stood up and turned his back on them, walking toward a heavy steel panel set into the wood paneling behind his desk. He punched a complex sequence into the keypad. "But you made the mistake of underestimating Otis Vance. He knew exactly who his daughter was, and he knew exactly who she would marry." The steel panel hissed open, revealing a small, high-security safe. Henderson reached inside and withdrew a thick manila envelope. It was sealed with red wax and stamped with the bank's archival seal. The date on the front was faded but legible. August 12, 1990. Brad frowned, his confidence faltering for the first time. "What is that?" "What is this?" Henderson said, placing the envelope gently in front of Mr. Sterling, "is the Otis Vance Blind Trust. It is not a will. It is a private living trust established 30 years ago. It operates outside of probate court. It operates outside of standard inheritance laws. And most importantly, it operates outside of your reach." Beatrice stared at the envelope as if it were a bomb. "A trust," she whispered. "My father did not have the money to set up a trust. Lawyers cost thousands of dollars." "Otis did not need outside lawyers," Henderson replied. "He had us." This trust was the final condition of his partnership agreement. He structured it with a specific trigger mechanism. It was designed to remain dormant and invisible to all system searches until a specific physical key was presented at this branch. He pointed to the rusted tin box and the blue passbook inside it. "That passbook is the key." By presenting it, Aaliyah did not just find an account. She activated the trust. The moment she handed it to the teller, the estate transferred from the holding company directly into the trust's control. Mr. Sterling picked up the envelope and broke the wax seal. The crack of the dried wax sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. He pulled out the documents and adjusted his glasses, scanning the first page. "It appears everything is in order," Sterling said, looking at Brad with a razor-sharp gaze. This document supersedes all intestate claims. The assets do not belong to the deceased anymore, Mr. Miller. They belong to the trust. And the trust has very specific instructions regarding who can claim beneficiary status. Brad looked like he was going to be sick. He knew what this meant. Trusts were ironclad. They were designed specifically to stop people like him from looting estates. Read it. Brad choked out, his voice strained. Read the terms. If it is a family trust, Beatrice is still the primary beneficiary. She is the matriarch. Sterling turned the page. His eyes widened slightly as he read the text. He looked up at me, then at Beatrice. Actually, Sterling said, his tone dropping to a deadly serious register, the terms are quite unique. Mr. Vance seemed to anticipate this exact scenario. The trust does not name a beneficiary by birthright, it names a beneficiary by character. And there is a disqualification clause that I think you need to hear. Mr. Sterling adjusted his glasses and looked down at the yellowed document with a reverence usually reserved for religious texts. The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the air conditioning and the frantic tapping of Brad's foot against the floor. Beatrice was staring at the paper as if she could burn a hole through it, with her eyes trying to change the words by sheer force of will. I am going to read Article 7, subsection B. Sterling announced, his voice carrying the weight of a judge passing sentence. It is titled the Steward's Clause. Listen closely, Mr. Miller, because this is where your argument regarding next of kin falls apart. He cleared his throat and began to read. The text was legal, but through the jargon I could hear my grandfather's voice. It was sharp, deliberate, and undeniably him. The assets held within this trust are to be transferred solely to the individual who presents the physical passbook, OP-1965-G. However, possession alone is not sufficient. The grantor. Otis Vance recognizes that items of sentimental value are often discarded by those who prioritize surface appearance over intrinsic worth. Therefore, the beneficiary must be a true steward. Sterling paused, looking directly at Beatrice. She flinched, shrinking back into her chair. He continued reading. To qualify as a steward, the bearer must have maintained voluntary custody of the passbook. Any act of discarding, disposing, trashing, or abandoning the physical instrument, even if it is later retrieved, constitutes an immediate and permanent forfeiture of all rights to the trust. The assets are reserved for the one who kept the book when it appeared worthless, not the one who retrieved it once its value was revealed. The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. The one who kept the book when it appeared worthless. Sterling lowered the document. Otis Vance was a brilliant man, he said softly. He knew that if he left this money to you directly, Mrs. Vance, you would have squandered it on appearances. He knew you were ashamed of his humble life. So he created a test of character. He tapped the paper. This clause is a trap designed specifically for greedy relatives. It ensures that the fortune only goes to someone who loved Otis Vance enough to keep a rusty old tin box simply because it belonged to him. It filters out the gold diggers. Brad's face had gone the color of ash. He understood the legal implications immediately. If Beatrice had thrown the book away, she had triggered the forfeiture clause. She was disqualified not by me, but by her own actions. That is ridiculous, Brad sputtered, though his voice lacked its usual power. You cannot enforce a clause based on subjective behavior. How do you define abandoning, putting it down, misplacing it? That is too vague to hold up in court. It is not vague at all, Sterling countered. The definition is clear. Intentional disposal, treating the legacy as refuse. Beatrice stood up, her hands shaking. This is nonsense. Nobody knows what happened to that book. I gave it to Aliyah. I handed it to her in the garage. It was a gift. She looked at me, her eyes wide and pleading, begging me to corroborate her lie. Aliyah, tell him I gave it to you. Tell him I wanted you to have Grandpa's things. I looked at her. She was terrified, not of losing me, but of losing the money. She was lying with the ease of a sociopath. She was rewriting the moment she called my grandfather's legacy filth into a moment of maternal generosity. Sterling looked at me too. Ms. Vance, did your mother gift you this item, or did she abandon it? The room held its breath. This was the moment. If I lied, if I covered for her, the clause might be void. We could split the money. I could buy my peace. But looking at the desperation in her eyes, I realized that peace bought with a lie is just another form of prison. She did not give it to me, I said clearly. She threw it in the trash. She told me it should stay buried. Brad did not miss a beat. The moment the words left my mouth, he pounced like a litigator who had just trapped a witness in a fatal lie. He pointed a shaking finger at me, his face twisting into a triumphant sneer. "There it is," he shouted, his voice echoing off the glass walls. "Did you hear that, Sterling? She just confessed. She admitted she took the item from the trash." He turned to Beatrice, grabbing her arm. "Beatrice, tell them where the trash can is located. Is it on the curb, or is it inside the garage?" "It is in the garage," Beatrice stammered, catching on to his pivot instantly. "Inside the house." "Exactly!" Brad roared, slamming his fist into his open palm. "That is private property. That is part of the curtilage of the estate. Legally, anything inside that bin still belongs to the homeowner until it is collected by the sanitation department." He spun around to face the bank lawyers, his eyes wild with adrenaline. "This is not a case of abandonment, Mr. Sterling. This is a case of theft." Aaliyah entered private property and removed an item from a secure container without permission. "That is larceny. That is stealing." He walked toward me, looming over the chair. "You did not find a fortune, Aaliyah. You stole it. You dug through your mother's personal property and took something that did not belong to you. And because you obtained the passbook through a criminal act, you have no legal standing to claim the trust. The fruit of the poisonous tree. You get nothing." Beatrice stood up, wiping her dry eyes. The Grieving Mother Act was gone entirely, replaced by righteous indignation. She pointed a manicured finger at me. "He is right. I never told you you could take that. I might have been cleaning out the attic. I might have set it aside to sort through later. You just grabbed it. You saw an opportunity to rob me and you took it." I stared at them, my mouth slightly open. The speed at which they twisted reality was dizzying. Moments ago, Beatrice was begging me to sign a paper because she loved me. Now she was accusing me of being a cat burglar in my own childhood home. "This is insane," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "You threw it at me, Beatrice. You literally tossed it in the bin and told me it was trash. You called Grandpa a hoarder." "That is your word against mine," Beatrice shot back, crossing her arms. "And I have 2 witnesses who will testify that you were acting erratic and aggressive. Brad and Dominique will both swear under oath that you took that box without consent." Brad pulled out his phone. "I am calling the police," he announced. "We are filing a report for theft of property valued over $1 million. That is a felony, Aaliyah. You are not walking out of here with a check. You are walking out in handcuffs. Unless..." He paused, holding the phone in the air, letting the threat hang there. "Unless you admit you made a mistake. Hand over the book, sign a waiver, admitting you have no claim, and we will decline to press charges. We will let you walk away clean. We will even give you a few thousand for your trouble. But if you force us to litigate, we will destroy you. We will paint you as a bitter, estranged daughter who robbed her grieving mother. Who do you think the jury is going to believe? The wealthy, successful family, or the girl who digs through garbage?" I looked at Mr. Sterling. The silver-haired lawyer was not panicking. He was watching Brad with a look of mild annoyance, like a man watching a toddler throw a tantrum in a fine restaurant. "Are you done?" Mr. Miller Sterling asked calmly. "Because while your understanding of property law is creative, it is fundamentally flawed regarding the specific terms of this instrument." Brad scoffed. "It is basic property law, Sterling. Theft is theft." Sterling picked up the passbook, holding it with a white-gloved hand. He looked at me, then at Brad. "Actually, under the unique bylaws of the Vance Trust, The definition of ownership is not defined by who owns the trash can, it is defined by the intent of the grantor. And Otis Vance was very specific about what happens when his legacy is treated like garbage. Brad stood there with his thumb hovering over the call button, his face twisted into a mask of smug victory. He thought he had me cornered. He thought his superior knowledge of property law and his expensive suit were enough to crush me. He had forgotten one crucial detail about himself. Brad was a narcissist who loved gadgets more than he loved people. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my cracked smartphone. My hands were steady now. The fear that had paralyzed me for years was gone, replaced by the cold, hard clarity of someone who holds a winning lottery ticket. "You are absolutely right, Brad," I said, my voice calm and even. "The garage is a very secure environment. You made sure of that. Do not you remember last 4th of July? You spent the entire barbecue bragging to your golf buddies about the new security system you installed, the Sentinel Pro, 4K resolution, night vision, motion tracking, and most importantly, real-time cloud backup." Brad's smile faltered. His eyes flicked to my phone, then back to my face. "You set up a family sharing account," I continued, tapping the icon on my screen, "so Dominique could check for her Amazon packages. You added me to the account so I could monitor the driveway when you guys were on vacation. And you never removed me, Brad. I guess you thought I was too insignificant to worry about. Or maybe you just forgot I existed." I opened the app. The interface loaded instantly. I scrolled back on the timeline to the previous afternoon. The app marked motion events with bright yellow spikes. There was a massive spike at 2:15 in the afternoon. I turned the screen toward Mr. Sterling and the bank's legal team. "Let us see what really happened," I said. I pressed play. The video was crystal clear. The high-definition camera Brad had bought to protect his Porsche captured every dust mote in the air. It showed Beatrice standing by the recycling bins in her silk robe, looking like a queen surveying a dump. It showed me standing by the door, looking small and frightened. And the audio, thanks to the high-fidelity microphones Brad had insisted on, was perfect. Beatrice's voice rang out from the tiny speaker, tinny but undeniable. "Get this trash out of my sight, Aaliyah. I do not want his junk cluttering up my house. Take it, burn it. I do not care. Just get it out of here." On the screen, Beatrice wound up and threw the tin box. She did not hand it to me gently. She did not offer it as a gift. She pitched it through the air with a look of pure revulsion. The camera captured the arc of the box flying across the garage and me catching it against my chest. I paused the video on the frame where the box left her hand. Her face was twisted in a snarl. Her arm was extended in the act of disposal. I looked at Mr. Sterling. "That looks like abandonment to me, and it certainly sounds like express permission to remove the item. She ordered me to take it. She ordered me to burn it. I just chose to keep it instead." The room was silent except for the hum of the hard drive in the corner. Mr. Sterling looked at the video, then at Brad, who had turned a sickly shade of gray. Beatrice sank back into her chair, covering her mouth with her hand. The lie had not just been exposed, it had been obliterated in 4,000 pixels. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. "So, Brad," I asked, keeping my eyes locked on his, "are we still calling the police? Because I am pretty sure filing a false police report when you have video evidence to the contrary is a crime. And I think Mr. Sterling here would be very interested to see that footage entered into the bank's official record." Mr. Sterling signaled to the paralegal standing by the wall. With a few quick keystrokes, the main presentation screen behind the mahogany table flickered to life. I tapped the cast button on my phone. The image of the dusty garage expanded to fill the entire 85-inch monitor, rendering my mother's cruelty in high-definition 4K resolution. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop humming. On the screen, the timestamp ticked forward. The Beatrice of yesterday stood amidst the recycling bins, wrapping her silk robe tight against her body. Her face was twisted into a sneer of pure, unadulterated disgust. Get this filth out of my sight! The voice boomed from the conference room speakers surrounding us in surround sound. It was shrill and hateful. Beatrice flinched in her chair as if her own voice had slapped her. On the screen, she wound up and hurled the rusted tin box. It flew through the air, a blur of brown and silver, before hitting my chest with a dull thud. The on-screen Aaliyah stumbled back, clutching the box like a lifeline. "Throw it away!" The digital Beatrice commanded, her voice echoing off the glass walls of the bank. "It should be buried, just like him. I do not care what you do with it. Just get it out of my house." I pressed pause. The image froze on Beatrice's face right at the moment of the throw. Her mouth was open in a snarl, her eyes dead and cold. It was not the face of a grieving daughter. It was the face of a woman disposing of garbage. Mr. Sterling stepped forward into the light of the projector, his shadow falling across the frozen image. He looked at Brad, who was staring at the floor, unable to meet anyone's gaze. "That, Mr. Miller, is what we call a dispositive act," Sterling said, his voice slicing through the tension. "In the eyes of the law, property is considered abandoned when the owner voluntarily relinquishes possession with the intent of terminating their ownership." He pointed to the screen. Mrs. Vance did not lose that box. She did not misplace it. She did not lend it. She expressly commanded the defendant to remove it and destroy it. She used the words "throw it away" and "I do not care." By uttering those phrases and physically ejecting the item from her control, she severed her legal claim to the asset instantly. Sterling turned to Beatrice, who was now pale and trembling. "Mrs. Vance, the moment that box left your hand, you abandoned your inheritance. You did not just throw away a tin can. You threw away the trust. You threw away the land. You threw away $45 million. And because Ms. Vance retrieved the abandoned property, it is now legally hers. Not by theft, but by the ancient law of finders keepers." He looked back at Brad. "So your claim of larceny is dead. Your claim of intestacy is dead. The only thing left in this room is the undeniable proof that you and your wife are exactly the kind of people Otis Vance wrote that clause to protect his legacy from." I disconnected my phone and the screen went black, plunging the room back into the soft, ambient lighting of the executive suite. The darkness felt like a judgment. Beatrice let out a small, choked sob, but nobody moved to comfort her. Not even Dominique, who was staring at her mother with a look of dawning horror, realizing that the beach house, the pool, and the future she felt entitled to had just vanished because her mother could not control her own hatred. The black screen of the monitor faded into the background, but the image of Beatrice's face, twisted in hate, seemed to remain burned into the air of the room. Brad looked like a man who had been punched in the gut. His legal arguments were ash. His moral high ground was a crater. But Mr. Henderson was not finished. He stood by the safe, his hand resting on a second thinner file folder that he had pulled out along with the trust documents. "You know the most tragic part of this charade," Mrs. Vance Henderson said, his voice quiet and dangerously calm. "It is that you almost got away with it. You played the part of the shocked daughter so well today. You acted as if you had no idea this money existed until Brad got the alert." He walked back to the table and slid the thin file across the mahogany surface. It stopped directly in front of Brad. "But we both know that is a lie. You knew about the Liberty account. You just did not have the book." Beatrice froze. Her weeping stopped, instantly replaced by a look of sheer animal terror. 5 years ago, Henderson continued opening the file to reveal a photocopied withdrawal slip and a grainy security photo. A woman entered our downtown branch. She was wearing a scarf and large sunglasses, but our cameras are excellent. She presented a death certificate for Otis Vance. She claimed he had died of a stroke in his nursing home. She tried to claim the balance of the account using a standard next of kin affidavit. I felt a chill run down my spine. 5 years ago, Grandpa was alive. He was frail, but he was alive. He was sitting in the back room of their house listening to the radio. The problem, Henderson said, tapping the document, was that the account was flagged as level 5. It required the Passbook code, The woman did not have it. She tried to guess. She failed 3 times. The system locked her out and she fled before security could detain her. We filed a report for attempted fraud, but without a name we could not pursue it. Until today. Henderson pointed to the signature at the bottom of the withdrawal slip. We ran a handwriting analysis against the waiver you just tried to force Aaliyah to sign. It is a perfect match. The loops on the B. The sharp slant of the V. It is identical. Brad grabbed the paper, his hands shaking so violently the paper rattled. He stared at the signature. He looked at the date. He looked at his wife. You tried to cash him out while he was still alive? Brad whispered, his voice horrified. That is wire fraud, Beatrice. That is forgery. That is a federal crime. I did it for us, Beatrice screamed, suddenly snapping. Her voice was shrill, hysterical. We were drowning Brad. The business was under, the mortgage was due. He was sitting there with millions of dollars rotting in a bank, and he would not give me a cent. He was selfish. He owed me. She turned to me, her eyes wide and manic. He was old Aaliyah. He did not need it. I was just trying to save our family. You tried to bury him before he was dead, I said, my voice flat. You wished him dead so much you went and got a certificate to prove it. That is not saving the family. That is monstrous. Henderson pressed a button on his desk phone. The LED light turned red. Captain, he said into the speakerphone, could you please step back into the room? We have a development regarding the identity of the fraud suspect from the 2021 case file. The heavy double doors opened immediately. The police captain, who had been standing guard in the hallway, stepped inside, his hand resting instinctively on his belt. He looked from Henderson to the weeping woman in the chair. Mr. Henderson, Officer Henderson said, pointing a steady finger at my mother. I would like to formally press charges on behalf of the bank and the estate of Otis Vance. We have evidence of attempted grand larceny, forgery, and identity theft. The suspect is sitting right there. The captain did not hesitate. He walked around the mahogany table with a heavy, purposeful stride that sucked the oxygen right out of the room. The jingle of metal was the only sound in the executive suite until the harsh ratchet of handcuffs cutting through the silence made everyone jump. Beatrice stared at the officer as if he were speaking a foreign language. She did not stand up. She remained frozen in her chair, her hands clutching the edge of the table, her knuckles white. Mrs. Vance, please stand up, the captain ordered, his voice flat and professional. You are under arrest for attempted bank fraud, forgery, and identity theft. Put your hands behind your back. Beatrice blinked rapidly. The reality of the situation crashed down on her all at once. The facade of the wealthy matriarch, the grieving daughter, the victim, it all shattered. She scrambled backward, knocking her leather chair over with a loud crash. No, she shrieked, scrambling away from the officer. You cannot arrest me. Do you know who I am? I am a member of the Arts Council. I am a donor. You cannot touch me. The captain was unimpressed. He reached out and grabbed her wrist, twisting it behind her back with practiced efficiency. Beatrice screamed, a raw, ugly sound that made Dominique cover her ears and sob. Brad, do something! Beatrice yelled, thrashing against the officer's grip. Tell them it was a mistake. Brad stood by the window, his face pale and slick with sweat. He looked at his wife, then at the bank's legal team, then at the security cameras recording everything. The calculation in his eyes was cold and instant. He smoothed his tie and took a step away from her. I did not know, Brad said, his voice shaking, but loud enough for the lawyers to hear. I had no idea she forged those documents. I thought the money came from a legitimate business loan. She acted alone. Beatrice went still. She twisted her head around, her eyes bulging with disbelief. What did you say? Brad looked at the floor. I am not going down for your mess, Beatrice. You signed the papers. You went to the branch. This is on you. You coward. Beatrice screamed, lunging at him, dragging the captain a few steps forward. It was your debt. You told me we were going to lose the house. You told me to fix the cash flow or you would leave me. You drove me to the bank. You waited in the car. Brad turned to Mr. Sterling, holding his hands up in surrender. She is hysterical. She is lying to spread the blame. I am a reputable financial analyst. I would never authorize fraud. Beatrice let out a howl of pure rage. She tried to kick him, her heel catching the air inches from his expensive suit. The captain finally secured the second cuff, locking her wrists together. The sound was final. The click of the metal signaled the end of the Vance dynasty. Dominique was curled in her chair, weeping into her hands. Mom, stop it. You are ruining everything. People are going to see this. Beatrice was hauled toward the door, her hair disheveled, her mascara running down her face in black streaks. She looked at me one last time. There was no love in her eyes, only a terrifying empty darkness. You did this, she hissed at me as the officers dragged her past. You ungrateful little rat. You destroyed this family. I stood my ground, watching the woman who had tormented me for years be dragged away by the consequences of her own greed. I did not destroy this family, I said softly, though I knew she wasn't listening. I just turned on the lights. And you couldn't survive the glare. The double doors swung shut behind her, cutting off her screams. The room fell into a stunned silence. Brad stood alone by the window, a man without a shield, while Dominique cried for a life that was already gone. I looked at the rusted tin box on the table. It was just a box, but it had done what I never could. It had set me free. The heavy double doors clicked shut, sealing the room in a silence that felt louder than Beatrice's screaming. Brad stood by the window, his chest heaving slightly. He took a moment to adjust his cuffs, pulling the fabric straight. He ran a hand through his hair, composing himself. He was a survivor. He had just thrown his wife to the wolves to save his own skin, and now he was calculating his next move. He turned toward me, a practiced, sympathetic smile plastered on his face. It was sickening. Aaliyah, he said, his voice smooth as oil. I am so sorry you had to see that. I had no idea she was that unstable. You have to understand, I was a victim of her manipulation too. He walked toward the table, reaching for his briefcase. I think it is best if we all take a breather. I'm going to head back to the office, handle the damage control, and we can reconnect next week to discuss a proper management strategy for your trust. Without Beatrice's interference, of course. He actually thought he was walking out of there. He thought he could just step over his wife's metaphorical corpse and cut a deal. Mr. Miller. Henderson's voice was not loud, but it stopped Brad in his tracks. The bank manager was standing by his desk holding a flash drive. He looked at Brad, not with anger, but with the clinical detachment of a coroner pronouncing a time of death. You are not going back to the office, Henderson said. In fact, if I were you, I would not bother going back there at all. Your keycard is likely already deactivated. Brad frowned, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. Excuse me, you do not tell me where I can go. I am a senior analyst at Archer & Company. I have a meeting at 2. You had a meeting, Mr. Sterling corrected, stepping forward. But 5 minutes ago, while the police were detaining your wife, Mr. Henderson sent a priority data packet to the compliance officer at your firm. It contained the video footage of this meeting. Specifically, the part where you attempted to coerce a vulnerable beneficiary into signing an irrevocable power of attorney without legal counsel. Brad went rigid. His arrogance evaporated, replaced by a dawn of genuine horror. You sent them the tape. That is privileged communication. There is no privilege when a crime is being committed. Sterling replied coldly. And that was just the first email. The second one went to the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the third went to the FINRA Ethics Board. Brad staggered back as if he had been slapped. He gripped the back of a chair to steady himself. You cannot do that, he whispered. You will ruin me. You ruined yourself, Henderson said, his voice hard. We also included the transcript of you claiming false knowledge of a state law to facilitate a theft. In the finance world, Mr. Miller, that is called gross ethical misconduct. You are done. You will never trade a stock, manage a portfolio, or set foot on a trading floor again. You are radioactive. Brad pulled out his phone. He stared at the screen. His hands were shaking so hard he almost dropped it. My notifications, he stammered, his eyes wide and wet. They are blowing up. HR just emailed me. Security is being sent to my desk to box up my personal effects. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. Aaliyah, please, you can stop this. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. If I lose my license, I lose everything. The house, the cars, the pension. I will be destitute. I looked at the man who had mocked my rusted Honda. The man who had laughed when Beatrice threw my inheritance in the trash. You are smart, Brad, I said, echoing the words he had used on me earlier. You can figure it out. Maybe you can get a job delivering mail. I hear it is honest work. Two security guards stepped forward. Mr. Miller Henderson said, gesturing to the door. You are trespassing. Please remove yourself from the premises before we add criminal trespass to your list of problems. Brad looked around the room one last time. He looked at the empty chair where Beatrice had sat. He looked at the millions of dollars on the table he would never touch. Then, with his head hung low, the wolf walked out of the room, leaving nothing behind but the smell of expensive cologne and failure. The silence that followed Brad's departure was heavy and suffocating. The only sound left in the room was the soft, rhythmic buzzing of a phone vibrating against the mahogany table. It was Dominique's phone. She was huddled in her chair, her mascara smeared in raccoon-like circles around her eyes, staring at the screen with a look of absolute incomprehension. It was not a text message. It was a push notification from her banking app. Then came another one. And another. A cascade of digital rejections scrolling down her lock screen. My cards. Dominique whispered, her voice trembling. Why are my cards declining? She tapped frantically on the glass, opening her accounts one by one. I watched the color drain from her face. The platinum card, suspended. The joint checking account she shared with Beatrice, frozen. Even her emergency credit line, revoked. The intricate financial web that sustained her lifestyle, the daily blowouts, the designer leases, the brunch tabs, had unraveled in seconds. The bank, reacting to the fraud charges against the primary account holder, had locked down everything linked to Beatrice Vance. Dominique looked up at me, panic rising in her chest. Aaliyah! My Uber account just kicked me off. I cannot even call a ride home. I said nothing. I just watched her. She stood up, her legs shaking, and stumbled toward me. She did not look like the confident influencer who had mocked my clothes yesterday. She looked like a child who had lost her mother in a supermarket. Aaliyah, please, she begged, reaching out to grab my hand. You have to help me. I have nothing in my name. Mom paid for everything. My apartment lease is under her corporation. My car payment is auto-drafted from her account. If they freeze her assets, I will be evicted by Monday. She squeezed my hand, her eyes wide and wet. I have a brand partnership shoot tomorrow. I need to pay the photographer. If I cancel, I will lose my contract. You cannot let that happen. We are sisters. Sisters. The word hung in the air, bitter and false. I pulled my hand away from her grip. It was a slow, deliberate motion. Dominique flinched as if I had struck her. Yesterday you were planning to put me in a guest house, I said, my voice cool and detached. You were talking about how generous you were for letting me live on the estate you thought you owned. You live-streamed my humiliation to your 50,000 followers because you thought it was funny content. That was just for the engagement, Dominique stammered, tears spilling over again. I did not mean it. I was just stressed. Aaliyah, I am begging you. I do not know how to pay bills. I do not know how to do any of this. I will die out there. You are 26 years old, Dominique, I replied. You have a college degree that Grandpa paid for. You have 2 arms and 2 legs. You are not going to die. You are just going to have to do what I have done every single day since I turned 18. I turned my back on her, facing Mr. Henderson in the window. You are going to have to work for a living. But Aaliyah, she wailed, her voice rising to a shriek. I cannot work. I am a brand. I am a public figure. You have $45 million. You can spare 5,000. Just give me enough to get through the month. Mr. Henderson stepped forward, signaling to the remaining security guard. Ms. Vance has made her position clear. Please escort this individual to the lobby. The guard took Dominique by the arm. She did not fight like Beatrice. She just collapsed into heavy sobbing heaves, her legs dragging slightly as she was led away. Aaliyah, look at me. I am your sister. You cannot leave me like this. I did not turn around. I stared out the window at the city skyline, at the buildings my grandfather had bought to save his community. I heard the elevator doors slide open, then shut, cutting off her wails. The room was finally quiet. The toxic noise that had filled my life for decades was gone. I was alone, but for the first time, I did not feel lonely. I felt clean. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of wet concrete and new beginnings. I stood on the corner of 4th and Main, watching the massive crane lower the heavy brass letters of the old bank sign onto a flatbed truck. For 50 years, First National had loomed over this district like a fortress, a place where people like my grandfather were allowed to deposit money, but never allowed to sit at the table. That ended today. Construction crews were already hoisting the new signage into place. It was simple, elegant, and impossible to ignore. The Otis Vance Foundation. Mr. Henderson walked out through the revolving doors. He looked different. The perpetual sweat of anxiety was gone, replaced by the calm, straight-backed posture of a man who finally believed in his work again. He carried a tablet, scrolling through the new personnel files. Good morning, Madam Chairwoman, he said, the title rolling off his tongue with genuine respect. The transition team is ahead of schedule. We have finalized the conversion of the retail floor into the community lending center. I nodded, adjusting the lapel of my new blazer. It was tailored sharp and paid for with my own money, not an allowance. My money. How is the staff taking the news? I asked. They are relieved, Henderson admitted. When the rumors of the takeover started, everyone expected a bloodbath. They thought you would fire everyone who worked here during the old regime. They thought you would want revenge for how you were treated in the lobby. I looked through the glass walls. I could see Kevin the teller, who had tried to call security on me, sitting at a desk in the front row. He wasn't counting cash anymore. He was helping an elderly woman fill out a grant application for her bakery. He looked up, caught my eye, and gave a small, humble nod. He looked terrified, but he also looked grateful. I am not my mother, I said quietly. Beatrice would have fired them just to feel powerful. She would have enjoyed the cruelty. But Grandpa Otis didn't save this bank to destroy livelihoods. He saved it to build a community. These people know the system. Now they are going to use that knowledge to help people instead of blocking them. Henderson smiled. We approved the first round of small business grants this morning. A mechanic shop, a daycare, and a bookstore. The funds are already being wired. It felt surreal. A month ago, I was begging for a place to sleep. Now, I was changing the economic landscape of the city with a signature. Beatrice was awaiting trial in a cell that was smaller than her walk-in closet. Brad was ruined, his name toxic in every financial circle in the state. And Dominique was presumably learning that likes on a screen do not pay for groceries. They were gone. The noise, the abuse, the constant feeling of being small, it had all vanished. I walked toward the center of the plaza, stopping directly under the shadow of the new sign. I tilted my head back, looking up past the steel and glass, past the skyscrapers, straight into the endless open blue of the sky. I reached into my bag and touched the cool dented metal of the rusted tin box. I carried it everywhere now. It was my compass. You were right, Grandpa, I whispered to the wind. The enemy was in the living room. But the future is right here. A bird took flight from the ledge of the building, soaring upward, catching the updraft. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with oxygen that finally felt like my own. A smile spread across my face, slow and genuine. I wasn't just safe. I wasn't just rich. I was free. And for the first time in the history of the Vance family, the person holding the power actually deserved it. The story of Aaliyah and the rusted tin box teaches us a profound lesson about the difference between price and value. Beatrice and her family were obsessed with the superficial appearance of wealth, luxury cars, mansions, and status, yet they were morally bankrupt. They discarded the grandfather's legacy because it looked like trash, proving that their greed had blinded them to true worth. Conversely, Aaliyah held on to the box, not for profit, but out of love and loyalty, demonstrating that true character is revealed by how we treat things and people when we believe they have nothing to offer us. Ultimately, the narrative serves as a warning that the enemy in the living room is often more dangerous than the wolf at the door. Beatrice lost her birthright not because of a legal technicality, but because of her own cruelty. The Steward's Clause was a moral test that she failed the moment she chose hate over family. It reminds us that integrity is the only currency that never depreciates, and that sometimes walking away from toxic relationships is the first step toward finding your true fortune. If you enjoyed seeing karma instantly hit those who deserved it, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story about justice served cold.